Stop, you haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Subscribe now, we have new stories every day. Now let's go. We are all wired differently, but how exactly these mechanisms will influence our actions in various circumstances remains a mystery. In other words, I don't believe we can predict how we will react to situations that truly change our lives. I remember, while both of my parents were alive, I thought I would be able to calmly cope with their deaths. That was the case until my mother passed away. Even though I was 21 years old and seemed like an adult, it shook me to my core. When I was alone, I would panic, and for several months, I could barely keep myself composed in public. On the other hand, when I was 19, I was on a date, and we were attacked by two guys. I didn't even think about what I would do next. I just reacted, even though I wasn't a karate champion or anything like that. I was only slightly bigger than the muggers, and one of them had a knife. I quickly moved my date behind me with one hand while simultaneously striking the guy with a knife in the groin. Then I elbowed the other guy in the face so hard that blood spurted everywhere from what was clearly a broken nose. I tried to strike the guy with the knife again, but they ran away, though the one who had been hit in the groin moved rather slowly. I started to chase them, but my date pulled me back. The point of these two stories, which were the most dramatic in my life until I wrote this, though there have been dozens of other smaller ones, is that I could not predict my reaction to significant events. I married Teresa after we had been dating for only a few months, shortly after my mother's death. Teresa never met my mother, but she helped me recover from the malaise I experienced after her passing. I quickly fell head over heels in love with Teresa, and it seemed to me that these feelings were mutual. To me, Teresa was beautiful, with stunning hips that drove me crazy and a charming, delightful smile. However, what I loved most about her were her kindness and cheerful personality. I considered myself a pleasant, easygoing guy, and she seemed to appreciate that about me as well. We got married 6 months after we met. Although I try not to dwell on it, sometimes I wondered how I would react if Teresa ever cheated on me. In those brief moments when I allowed myself to think about it, I always believed that unless the circumstances were completely bizarre, I would probably forgive her and we would continue our life together. The only real effect these fleeting thoughts usually had on me was a determination to make Teresa happy, especially when we were having sex. Teresa seemed inexperienced when we first became intimate, although we never discussed our past relationships. Despite her initial hesitation, she gradually became more comfortable and began to enjoy our time together. I learned how to make her feel cherished and close to me, especially when I paid careful attention to her needs and desires. Our physical connection grew stronger over time, and I could tell she appreciated it. She had a particular preference for certain moments, which I found fulfilling as well. Her curvy figure, which I had always admired, added to the experience, creating a deep connection between us. The closeness we shared during these moments was incredibly meaningful to me, and her reactions made it clear that she felt the same way. After 4 years of marriage, we started talking about having children, something we had always planned to do after a few years together. Around this time, Teresa went through a phase of mood changes that lasted about 3 weeks. It wasn't her usual premenstrual symptoms, which had never been particularly difficult for her. Instead, she seemed more distant and reflective, except when we were sharing intimate moments. When I asked her how she was feeling, she often brushed it off, attributed it to work stress, or gave a response that didn't seem entirely convincing. She worked as a personal trainer. How stressful could that be? Then, one Friday evening, when I came home to our 2-bedroom apartment, I heard the words every man dreads the most. "Blake, honey, we need to talk." I swallowed hard and sat down in the living room opposite where she was sitting, sipping wine from a glass with a somewhat distant expression on her face. "Would you like something to drink, honey?" she asked. "No, I'm fine," I replied. "Is this about how you've been feeling over the last 3 weeks?" "Yes, probably. The thought of having children makes me feel anxious and dissatisfied. I have this intense desire. What I need to do is take a break from our marriage for a while until I can get my thoughts in order. Then we can be together again forever and have 3 or 4 children." "A break? What the hell does that mean?" "We're not college professors," I probably shouted more than I replied. "There's no need to be rude, darling, just a small break. Probably no more than a month," she replied, avoiding eye contact with me. "I don't recall a break being part of our vows or plans," I retorted. "I know, but things have become complicated for me. I just really need a bit of time off." "Where are you going?" "Because I'm staying here," I responded, hopefully in a more conciliatory tone. "My friend Karen from work has a 2-bedroom apartment, and her roommate just moved out, so I can stay there for a month or however long it takes." Only then did I notice that our 2 largest suitcases were packed and sitting by the front door. Very observant of me, right? "I'll call you in a day or so," she said, standing up and walking toward me after finishing her wine. I stood up too. I hugged her. Please don't go, I said, my voice breaking. I need to, darling. I love you, she replied, kissing me with a pensive look on her face. Will you help me with the suitcases? She asked with a smile and another quick kiss. I followed her to her car, carrying the suitcases like some mindless porter. I placed them in the trunk and once more asked her not to leave. In response, she gave me one last quick kiss and drove away, waving goodbye. I held myself together until I returned to my apartment, but then I lost my composure, just like the day my mother died. All weekend, I could think of nothing but how to get Teresa back. I'm sure the messages I left on Teresa's cell phone were heartfelt. She did thank me for the roses I sent her at work when she called me. I answered on the first ring, and I got the feeling that in her eyes that was a pitiful response. In reality, it seemed like the next 3 weeks were a real ordeal for me. Of course, my situation affected my work, but fortunately, I have a job where I don't need to interact with others too much if I don't want to, and I have an understanding boss. However, even she picked up on my mood, and about 2.5 weeks into my despair, on a Wednesday morning, she asked me a serious question. What the hell is wrong with you, Blake? In the last 3 weeks, you've gone from being one of my top 2 employees to a useless pile of crap. Why is your head up your ass? Belinda asked me. As you can see, Belinda doesn't mince words and has a remarkable personality. She's 5 years older than me, smart, and although her looks are slightly above average, she's about 180 centimeters tall, and her figure is as impressive as her personality. Sorry, Belinda, I've been dealing with some personal issues that are distracting me. My wife has taken a break from our marriage. What did you say? She barked. Well, it means, I began to meekly explain, even though I'm 10 centimeters taller than her, I felt like a small child looking up at her before she loudly cut me off. I know what the hell it's supposed to mean. I'm wondering why you're such a spineless person that you're going along with it. I didn't take you for a weakling, Blake. As I stammered, trying to say something in response, she grabbed me by the shoulders with hands that were incredibly strong, even for a woman with muscular arms and legs. Stop trying to explain or justify anything. That's your personal business, and if you want to be a freaking pushover outside the office, I can't stop you. However, you have 3 more work days to bring back the Blake, who is one of my best employees. If you don't do that within 3 days, I'm putting you on creative leave. Got it? Damn, she was intimidating. Got it, I replied submissively. By this time on Monday, what is that, 10:30? She continued, yes, about that time. I answered, good, by 10:30 on Monday. I'd better see the old Blake or I'm suspending you from work for 2 weeks without pay. With that, she patted my cheek, what was meant to be a gentle gesture from her, and probably would have been gentle from any ordinary woman, then turned and walked back to her office. I continued to act like a fool on Saturday evening, still waiting for calls from Teresa and preoccupied with how to win her back, despite my desire to develop the strength of character that Belinda demanded of me. I decided to go to the movies to distract myself from my problems, but I went alone, not with a friend, and that's when I saw them. There was Teresa with a broad smile on her face, holding hands with a guy whose physical appearance was, in my opinion, quite different from mine, waiting in line for tickets. I immediately went home with a broken heart. I went straight to bed, suddenly realizing how emotionally drained I was. When I woke up on Sunday at 8 a.m., I had a new outlook on life. I found that my reaction was vastly different from what I had previously imagined. Although I can't say I no longer cared about Teresa because I truly did love her, my entire approach was a complete 180 from what it had been before or what I could have predicted. I gathered some friends and we played a game of mini football. 3 of them joined me for lunch afterward, and then I began searching for a new apartment. We had been living month to month in our apartment after the lease expired, and there were 25 days left until the end of the current month, so I could give 15 days notice and get the security deposit back. I went to look at 3 apartments and found one just 2 blocks from my office, which was quite suitable and where I could move in on the last day of the current month. On Monday morning at work, I was on fire. The old Blake was back with a 20% boost. Belinda didn't say anything. She just smiled. During my lunch break on Monday, I met with an old friend who had recently divorced and got a recommendation for a divorce attorney from her. Take the one my ex-husband used, she laughed. He's the nastiest shark in the water when necessary, but he can be reasonable when it counts. She continued, jotting down his name and phone number. I called him before returning to work and scheduled a meeting for Wednesday. As part of my transformation, I was still at work at 6:30 p.m. Belinda was the only other person there. When Teresa called me on my cell phone, I sent the call to voicemail. I was leaving at the same time as Belinda. I see you took my advice to heart. She smirked as we entered the elevator together. Yeah, damn right. I didn't want you kicking my ass. I smirked back. Heading home to your empty apartment, she asked. No, I'm going to hit the gym first, I replied, lifting my gym bag and then grab a bite to eat. How about you? Same here, she laughed, lifting her own gin bag. Where do you work out? I asked. At Planet Fitness on the corner of Harvey and Forest, she replied. How about you? At Planet Fitness on the corner of 23rd and Essex, I laughed. Come to mine on Harvey tonight, and after the workout I'll treat you to dinner to celebrate your return to life, she smiled. Deal, I replied. Working out with Belinda was challenging for 3 reasons. It was hard not to be obvious while admiring her hot body as she grunted and groaned during exercises. It was humbling that except for a few upper body exercises, she could match or surpass me in everything involving the equipment. And she was my boss. Working out with Belinda was great for 2 reasons. She had the aforementioned incredible body, which truly inspired me, and she seemed to know everyone. It was impossible not to be in a good mood around her, especially when everyone greeted her and she introduced me to them. After the workout, we had a nice platonic dinner at Olive Garden and simply waved goodbye to each other. However, that night for the first time in my life, I started looking at Belinda as a sexual object rather than just my boss. I wanted to hold her close, feeling her body against mine, and gently embrace her with both hands. I simply ignored Teresa's calls over the next 2 days, including once while I was waiting for an appointment in the office of a well-known attorney. His name was Bill Betts. I told Betts that I just wanted to get a divorce due to irreconcilable differences and didn't want to go into details. He insisted that I tell the whole story if I wanted him to represent my interests. So I gave him a brief overview and answered about 20 probing questions. All right, Blake, I'll represent you. Here's the price list for my fees, he said after receiving a satisfactory answer to the last question. My eyebrows went up. It wasn't going to be cheap, but given my current attitude toward life, I considered it money well spent in case things got complicated. You should be prepared for your wife's attorney to suggest a reconciliation consultation, and if he or she does, 3 out of 4 judges in this jurisdiction will agree to it. How do we find that 4th judge? I smirked. Luck of the draw, sorry, there's nothing I can do to influence that. However, in the end, it shouldn't cost you too much since you don't have kids and not a lot of assets to divide. It will just be an inconvenience since you'll have to pretend to participate even if you're completely against reconciliation. You are completely against it, right? Betts replied. Completely, I answered, not laughing or smiling, but with the most serious expression I could muster. When will the papers be ready? I can have everything ready in 10 days or even less, including my special process server. Why do we need a special process server? I asked. He will accompany you and serve the papers along with you. He can do it quietly and discreetly or make a scene, your choice. Thank you, Mr. Betts, I said, standing up to shake his hand. I'm Bill, and you're Blake. No need for Mr., he replied, shaking my hand. And send Teresa an email about the apartment 2 days before you notify your landlord. That evening, I received 3 more calls and an email from Teresa. I didn't respond to any of them. I think she was surprised that I was no longer kissing up to her. The next day, I sent Teresa a quick email response. Tomorrow, I will notify the landlord that I'm moving out unless you sign a new lease on your own. I have another apartment that I'll be moving into on the last day of the month. If you don't tell me by 5 p.m. tomorrow that you will handle the new lease on your own, I will notify the landlord. In response to my email, she sent 10 more emails and made 10 more calls, none of which I answered. She stepped between me and the TV. Please turn off the TV so we can talk, she said, hands on her hips, clearly agitated. No, I'm really enjoying this game. Maybe we can talk after it's over or during a commercial, I responded. She reached out and turned off the TV. We need to talk, she said, sitting down but holding the remote in her hand, probably to keep it out of my reach. What's so important that you have to interrupt my enjoyment? I asked. Don't you have anything to do on your break? That's exactly what we need to talk about. I think the break was a mistake, and I'm coming back tomorrow so that we can start trying for a baby in a couple of months, she said, her previous stern expression replaced by a broad smile, as if this were the best news in the world. And who do you plan to have this child with? I asked thoughtfully. What with you, of course, she replied, irritated. Sorry, Teresa, but during our break, I came to some real realizations. I realized that I never loved you, you were just a good partner. And by the way, you were a good partner in bed, I said, frowning at first, then smiling. However, I have no intention of having children with you or staying married even 1 day longer than necessary. I can file for divorce at a time that's convenient for you. I don't want to interfere with your important plans during your break. At first, she looked shocked, then surprised, and finally, a sleek smile appeared on her face as she stood up and walked toward me, casually dropping the remote on her way. I see what's going on, darling. You're a bit upset about my suggestion to take a break. How about I make it up to you in a special way? I quickly extended my right arm, stopping her from getting too close. Teresa, you're incredibly attractive and I'd love to spend time together, but I want to be clear, this isn't about any kind of payback. I've already said we're done with the conversation. If you still want to be with me, head to the bedroom and get comfortable." I could tell she was surprised again. However, it was clear she didn't quite believe me and thought it might be part of a playful exchange. So after a brief pause, she smiled and said, "All right, darling," and started heading to the bedroom while undressing. You have to understand, I hadn't been intimate with anyone since she left about a month ago. And for most of that time, I was so depressed that I only felt the need to relieve myself once. Why should I turn down such an opportunity? Teresa was very attractive, and that's how she would be perceived. When I entered the bedroom, she was lying on the bed with a confident smile. I complimented her, quickly got ready, and felt excited. Though she briefly reacted to my words, her smile returned. I took my time, gently kissing and touching her, making her sigh softly. After a few moments, we became intimate, and she was more enthusiastic than ever. We both enjoyed the experience, and when it was over, she relaxed onto my chest. As the intensity faded, I gently moved her aside and calmly suggested she freshen up. She thought I was joking. "I don't do that," she replied with a smirk. "Then I guess I'll get back to the game," I responded and started to get up. She pulled me back with a playful expression that quickly turned into a forced smile. "Is this part of my punishment?" she asked, surprisingly going along with it. Her unexpected compliance and the way she moved reignited my interest. Before long, we were close again, and the intensity of the moment reached new heights. The sound she made drew me completely into the experience, making it one of the most memorable moments I've ever had. I didn't return to the game that evening. We shared 2 more intimate moments, one in our usual way and another in a way she rarely agreed to because of the mess. The next morning, I got up before Teresa and made myself breakfast. I was halfway through when she walked into the kitchen. "Something smells good," she purred, "or maybe all my senses are heightened from the amazing night we had," she giggled. I didn't respond. "And where's my breakfast?" she asked, eyeing the plate with the remains of the omelet I was eating. "The eggs are in the fridge," I replied casually, pointing to it. She looked very puzzled, then sat down next to me. "So, what are we going to do after work today?" she asked hopefully. "I don't know what you're planning to do, but I'm going to work out and then grab a quick dinner," I replied. "I thought that after yesterday we might do something together tonight," she responded hesitantly. "Last night wasn't about punishment, it was just sex. I have to say, you really outdid yourself. I think I enjoyed it more intensely than ever before. You might be the best partner I've ever had," I said while continuing to eat. Although Teresa wasn't used to me talking to her like that, how could she not take it as a compliment? "See, you missed me," she began as I got up, rinsed my plate, put it in the dishwasher, and smiled. "Goodbye, maybe we can do this again sometime." I was pretty sure I heard her say, but, as I walked out the door, but I wasn't certain because I didn't look back. That day at work, I received several affectionate messages and emails from Teresa. I didn't respond. I did cancel the apartment lease when Teresa didn't call me by 5 p.m. Additionally, I called Bill Betts in the morning and asked if the papers could be served at 8 a.m. on Monday at our apartment. He grumbled but agreed. Those weekends were perhaps the most surprising in my life. Although Teresa had always been a great partner, she was clearly unsure if I was serious about the divorce and moving to another apartment or if I was just playing a game. So she went out of her way to keep me engaged and satisfied. Since she put in so much effort and succeeded in giving me more physical satisfaction than ever before, I couldn't resist at least throwing her a couple of bones by inviting her to dinner on Saturday night and watching a couple of movies together on Sunday evening. Waking up Teresa on Monday morning was truly unpleasant. As I stood in the kitchen, she, still in her robe with nothing underneath, approached me, wrapped her arms around my neck, and whispered, "Oh my God, Blake, I think last night was the best you've ever been." Although the last 4 days have been pure bliss, so I'm not entirely sure. All I know is that I'm still feeling the effects. The previous night, I had indeed been particularly intense, including holding her by the hips and pressing her against the shower tiles. A knock on the door interrupted her mood. "Who could be here at 8 in the morning?" she asked, puzzled. "I'll get it." "It's for you," I said, walking to the door and opening it. "Mr. Applegate, I presume," I said to the well-dressed man with a 1960s style, holding a fedora in his hand. "That must be me," he replied. "Teresa, this is for you. Just come over in your robe, but keep it closed. We wouldn't want Mr. Applegate to have a heart attack." I chuckled, and he laughed. Teresa cautiously approached us. "You're Teresa Hansen, aren't you?" Mr. Applegate asked in the most friendly tone. Yes, that's me," she replied. "I have something for you," he continued, handing her a thick paper envelope. After Teresa took it, he politely said, "You can serve, Mrs. Hansen. Have a nice day," and putting on his hat, he headed toward the elevator. "What is this?" she asked, turning to me. "Well, those are the divorce papers," I replied. "What? But, she stammered. It seemed she didn't believe me, so she tore open the envelope and looked inside. She began to cry. I'll try to make amends. The connection was so strong. I love you. I don't want a divorce, were some of the words she muttered between sobs. I put my arm around her shoulders. Teresa, look at me. I was very serious when I told you that your break made me reevaluate our relationship. I think you're amazing, but I don't love you, and we are getting divorced. If you want to continue a physical relationship, I'm okay with that as long as you understand it's not a reconciliation. She started crying even harder, and her words became completely unintelligible. I went to work. Apparently, she didn't leave. Early in the morning, I received a call from the landline in our apartment. I answered the call, still quietly sobbing. Teresa said, Blake, the building manager came by, and he wants to show our apartment. He said you submitted a notice to terminate the lease. I told you I would do that if you didn't want to sign a new lease by noon on Friday. He might still let you sign it, but you won't be able to stop him from showing the apartment, I replied. But I can't afford it, she lamented. Then let him show the place. Listen, I need to get back to work, I said and hung up. Teresa finally accepted reality. She hired a lawyer and rented an apartment on a month-to-month basis, obviously thinking that we might somehow get back together. I slept in the second bedroom as further confirmation that we were not going to be together, but she did come into my room 2 nights in a row, trying to win me back. I didn't refuse, although by then I had already realized that I would miss the incredible connection we shared, as satisfying me seemed to have become her main goal in life. Finally, the last Saturday of the month arrived. I moved all my belongings to my new apartment, except for a couple of items in the second bedroom, and Teresa was planning to move all her furniture, including everything from a master bedroom that I had given her, to a storage unit. On Thursday, she told me. On Saturday, some guys from my work are coming over to help me move our things into storage. Can you help? Teresa, I've already told you that I want professional movers to help you. I'll even pay for them. I don't want the guys from your work here. Why not? She asked. The main reason, of course, was that I was pretty sure the guy who was holding her hand at the movies was one of her colleagues, and I didn't want to cause a scene. Because I want professional movers, not a scene, I replied, crossing my arms. There won't be a scene, she said, stamping her foot. Please don't forget to hire professionals, or this could be almost as big a mistake as your break, I called over my shoulder before leaving. For some reason, Teresa decided to ignore my request that only professionals should handle the move. On Saturday morning, 3 guys from her work showed up. One of them, as I suspected, was the guy who had been holding her hand at the movies. What are you 3 doing here? I asked roughly. Hey, don't be so hostile, man. One of the 3 said, we're just here to help Teresa move. I told her to hire professionals, I snapped. Teresa, standing nearby, blushed and started to say something, but the same talkative guy sarcastically remarked, apparently she doesn't listen to you. He didn't finish because my fist hit him in the mouth before he could. Listen, jerk, don't you dare come into my house and start mouthing off. Got it? I yelled, pointing at him. They're not to blame, Blake. Don't be angry with them, Teresa pleaded. Not to blame. I asked. Let me ask a question. Which one of you guys has been involved with Teresa? Blake, she shouted. All 3 guys remained silent, especially the one who was trying to check if I had dislocated his jaw. Don't touch anything in the second bedroom and don't do anything inappropriate in my apartment, I growled as I headed toward the door. The guy who had been with Teresa at the movies made a mistake by saying, hey man, there's no need to be rude, and touched my arm as I walked by. I grabbed his arm, twisted it, and used one of the few judo moves I knew to bring him down. I got as close to his face as possible in that position. Don't tell me what to do, and don't touch me, or I'll break your arm at the elbow. It'll take at least 4 months to heal. Teresa kept shouting repeatedly, don't hurt him, Blake, please. The 2 other guys seemed like they were about to step toward me when their friend yelled. One more step, and I'll break his arm, and then, I assure you, I'll take both of you down. I growled. They backed off. I pushed the guy with the twisted arm onto the floor, somehow managing to keep enough self-control not to break it, and then I left. After the moving incident, I didn't think Teresa would contest the divorce. I was wrong. Her lawyer requested a consultation with the court, and we ended up with one of the 4 judges who typically handle divorce cases. Bill Betts managed to reduce the number of consultations from the 10 that Teresa's lawyer initially requested down to 5. The consultations didn't do any good for either the counselor or Teresa. I kept bringing up the break she took, which made me realize that the only thing I really liked about Teresa was the physical aspect of our relationship. I constantly questioned the reason for her taking that break, despite the counselor's efforts to steer me away from that topic. I would often end my questioning with a statement like, the only reason I can think of is that you wanted to be with other guys. Well, once we're divorced, there won't be anything stopping you. Typically, this would bring Teresa to tears, the counselor would reprimand me, and I would just smile. When the final session came and there was still no progress, Teresa decided to give up. About 10 minutes into the session, partially in tears, she began to plead. "Blake, please forgive me. Before our marriage, I had never been with any man except you, and various guys always told me how great I looked. I wanted to experience something different before we had children. I'm sorry I was so weak, but if I hadn't done it, I might have had regrets later. Now that I've gotten it out of my system, I know that no one can satisfy me the way you do. I desperately need you to forgive me so we can continue with the life we planned." Before the break, I had predicted my reaction would be to forgive her, the divorce process would be halted, and we would fully reconcile. However, my pride wouldn't allow those thoughts to dominate my mind. After a meaningful pause, I replied, "I'm glad you finally admitted this, Teresa. I'm sure it will serve as a valuable lesson in your next relationship. You're a beautiful and attractive woman, and I'm confident you'll find someone else quickly. But as for us, we're in the past." I slowly stood up, thanked the counselor, even though she hadn't really done anything, and left, despite the fact that there were still about 30 minutes left in the mandatory consultation. Teresa's sobbing in the background didn't tug at my heartstrings. Instead, it more or less served as a hallelujah chorus for the dramatic symbolic end of our marriage. After the final session, Teresa didn't resist the divorce. I gave her all the furniture she wanted. We split our modest savings 50-50, and I agreed to pay her a nominal monthly allowance for 5 years or until she remarried. The only woman I interacted with between the last consultation and the finalization of the divorce was Belinda, with whom I occasionally worked out and had dinner. It was always on a platonic basis. However, I did begin to appreciate her personality and presence more and more. She was fun to be around and easy to flirt with, although I also felt relief and pride that I hadn't been a pushover. On the Friday when I received notice that my divorce was final, I still felt awful. Normally, I never drink, but for some reason, that day I brought some alcohol to the office after everyone had left and started drinking alone. Suddenly, Belinda appeared in the doorway, sweaty and in her workout clothes. "What are you doing here, Blake?" she asked. "Why the hell are you here?" I responded. "I forgot some papers, so I came by to get them after my workout, but that's not an answer to my question. I came here because my divorce was finalized today, and I'm celebrating." "It looks more like a pity party than a celebration," she smirked. I have no idea what came over me. It was probably a combination of the alcohol, the fact that I hadn't been intimate in a long time, my lingering sadness, and how attractive Belinda looked, but I had the most uncharacteristic reaction of my life. Something I never could have predicted. I stood up from my desk, walked over to Belinda, and hugged her. "I'm going to be with you tonight, Belinda," I said with a growl. Her reaction was not at all what I expected. Belinda is strong and capable, and in my state at the time, there was no way I could have been with her if she didn't want it. But instead of pushing me away or reacting aggressively, she gave me a devilish smile. "If you do, you'll get fired because office relationships are against the rules. Will you give me a good recommendation?" I chuckled. "That depends on how well you do," she giggled in response. Within a minute, we were together, and it was an unexpected and intense experience. The rest of the weekend, Belinda and I spent together at her place. Despite the fact that I couldn't manage a repeat performance on Friday night due to the alcohol, we made up for it from Saturday morning until Sunday evening. On Monday morning, I submitted my resignation. Belinda gave me excellent recommendations, and within 3 weeks, I had a new job. During the break between jobs, I spent a week helping Belinda organize her house and moving my things in. After 2 years of living together without any breaks, she stopped taking her birth control. We got married, and she became pregnant. I discovered that I was especially drawn to her during her pregnancy, and although we were thrilled with the arrival of our precious baby girl, I felt a little sad that the pregnancy was over. Looks like I'll have to help her get pregnant again. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.